The king knows who you are, and until this can be resolved, we've been told to take you into custody.
Hi, I'm Claire, and welcome back to the next episode of Let's Build Wingtorn. Let's get back into the story.
So that brings us to the end of this round. We had 7 turns. They were all very good turns. What would usually happen now if we were playing Microscope with a group of people is we would have what's called a legacy turn. The rules put it, after all players have addressed the focus, we take a step back and examine legacies, elements of the history we want to remember to explore later on. So in regular play, the person to the right of whoever was the lens chooses an element that was just put into play in this round and can make it a legacy item. They can create an event or a scene in any of the legacy topics. Usually you have as many legacies as there are players. It's just me. I have 2 legacies that are in play because, you know, it's technically just me and the Oracle, so 2 makes it more interesting. The 2 legacies that I currently have in play, because I've done a couple of rounds before I started recording. 1, the life of Larsk. Larsk is a minor character in the Wingtorn podcast. He's actually the son of one of the major villains, but I've kind of hinted that maybe he's not so into what his dad is into, aka being a villain. I think that he's had a really hard life and maybe he will flip to our protagonist's side, and I was sort of trying to explore different events in his life to see if he would actually become friends with our protagonist. And the second legacy that I have in play, it's a bit of an odd one. It's a particular publication that the protagonists in Wingtorn come across in a future story that has not been written yet. It's a bit random, I know. The Oracle chose it, not me. Publication is called Quickened from Human Minds publication. It's a bit of, it fancies itself highbrow, a highbrow publication that only has a couple of writers with very specific points of view. It's a very minor thing, don't worry about it. So those are the 2 legacies that are in play currently. Okay, so technically since it was my turn, the Oracle gets to choose a legacy change, whether one of the 2 legacies that I've just mentioned gets replaced by something that has been developed in play to be explored later on. Which element is the Oracle going to choose to put into legacy? Oh boy. I mean, for me, I choose the murdering sister murder because, like, that's cool. But it's not my decision, it's the dice's decision. We had 7 things that were developed, so let's roll a d8, and if we land on 8, that means roll again. So which scene or event will go into legacy? That is a 4. So what was our 4th thing? So that means our event with the youngest sister helping the family of the Fae Vigilantes be released from prison or escape from prison. That is now legacy. And it replaces one of our legacies, and it is the Oracle, so they get to choose. Is it the Human Minds publication legacy that gets replaced, or the life of Larsk? Hope it's not the life of Larsk. Kind of want to explore that. Whoops. So 1 to 3 is the publication, 4 to 6 is life of Larsk. It is life of Larsk. See ya. Now that the Oracle has chosen a legacy, they have to decide which legacy they're going to create a new event or scene in. So we'll ask the dice. I will roll a d6. Let's say 1 to 3 is the publication and 4 to 6 is the new legacy they've chosen to do with the younger sister. Let's roll 4. So they're going to create an event or scene to do with the sister, helping the families, the vigilantes that have been imprisoned. Is it a scene? I'm going to say very likely. So +4. Yes, that is a scene. So just as a refresher, this legacy is about the youngest sister who was pregnant at the time. She meets with a group of Fae in a secret tunnel beneath the castle, and these group of Fae are the families. They want to free these Fae vigilantes that have been imprisoned. The Fae vigilantes saved this younger sister's life. We just created a scene that answered the question, why is the younger sister so keen to help free these prisoners? That's because they saved her life. We still have quite a lot of questions to be answered about this particular event, so let's just ask the oracle some yes or no questions to guide us. Sounds very woo-woo. One dice to decide futures. Is this scene about her secretly trying to get these Fae vigilantes released? I don't know, 50-50. No. The fact that we had drawn a card of fertility and kind of decided that she was pregnant. Is this scene, I mean, it's still about her trying to free the vigilantes. If we think of this in terms of a broader story, we can make a scene, any particular scene about anything relating to her trying to free the vigilantes, but it can also be kind of B-story scene, if you will, about her pregnancy. Is this scene about her pregnancy? 50-50, we're trying to get over an 11 here. No, okay. Is this scene about the Fae vigilantes themselves? 12, yes. Okay, finally. Okay, this is a scene about the Fae vigilantes. We know that there are 2 of them. I'm kind of picturing like a Batman and Robin situation. Maybe one is older than the other, one is kind of helping the other. Is that the case? I'm gonna say very likely, +4. Yes, that is the case. I think we need to know a little bit more about these Fae vigilantes that saved the youngest sister's life. Let's draw some cards. And once we know a little bit more about them, then we can kind of come up with a question for a scene. Ooh, okay, so we have an orphan, a pickpocket, a clockmaster, and an airship captain. Kind of like orphan, I think that fits with an older and a younger dynamic that we've established. Pickpocket would fit too. Okay, and then the other card we have here is our 4 options are tourist, trailblazer, an explorer, and a diplomat. Diplomat's very interesting. Wouldn't necessarily think of a diplomat vigilante, but maybe diplomat is what their real job is, and they are secretly. That makes a lot of sense actually, because maybe the secret vigilante is in fact a Fae diplomat, and they moonlight as a vigilante because they're against this war. Both of these vigilantes are anti-war. So maybe this diplomat and working with this orphan, they've come to the human capital under the guise of establishing relations, peace talks, that will eventually lead to the ceasefire, but they also decide to do some vigilante justice. Maybe they are imprisoned because their vigilante status is discovered, and they're stripped of their diplomatic title, despite the fact that they would have saved this younger sister's life. Ooh, that would actually make a lot of sense. Okay, let's ask the dice and see if that's true. I'm gonna say +4, because I really like that idea, and I think it makes sense. 12, yes, yes. Let's roll some genders for these people so actually know their pronouns. So the diplomat, whom I'm assuming is the elder of the two, is a woman and male. So a 2 Fae, a female diplomat, and a male orphan. They are both vigilantes. So remember, we haven't even really established a question for this scene, but I think the question that we've kind of dug up here is, why were the vigilantes imprisoned despite saving the younger sister's life? And the answer is that one of the vigilantes was actually a Fae diplomat, and they're abusing their status, so the human king imprisoned them, rightfully or wrongfully. So we have to create a very specific scene. I'm thinking that this scene is the night they are captured. I'm assuming it's night. I could ask, but I think it's kind of moody and dramatic if it's night. I think they're probably staying in a nicer part of the castle, or perhaps more neutral grounds, like an inn, maybe just outside of the castle walls. They're probably under guard because, you know, they are Fae, they are in enemy territory, but they probably have some kind of protections, being well, the elder is a diplomat. I'm making some assumptions here that the orphan boy is traveling with the diplomat as like an assistant. That will be their cover story. I think that she and the boy are enjoying a quiet evening in their lodgings. They're sitting by the fire together and they're plotting. Maybe the boy is sewing his costume, if he wears a costume, or some kind of masks or disguise, perhaps tending to some wounds that they would have sustained during their fight. I picture this diplomat, she's staring into the fire, she's thinking, she's analyzing, she's worrying, because she just saved the youngest queen's life, and maybe she's agonizing over that, and maybe she's thinking, do I tell this queen who I am? Would that speed up the peace talks? Maybe it's in our interests. And she's thinking about this. And suddenly, there's a knock at the door. And she and the boy look up. She sits up in her chair, and the boy, they kind of exchange looks, and the boy goes to answer the door, and the diplomat, I don't know what kind of weapons she would have, or if she uses any kind of magic. So that's a good question. Does the diplomat wield magic? Probably. Most Fae have magical inclination. No, she is not specifically a wielder. So maybe she has like a hidden dagger and she sort of has her hand over it ready. And the boy answers the door, and it's a group of Imperial guards, human Imperial guards, and they storm past the boy while one of them grabs the boy. Well, let's roll a dice. How many are there? +2. 5. 3 + 2, 5. There's 5 guards to restrain these 2 people. 3 of them storm in, 2 of them grab the boy. They surround this Fae diplomat. They might be careful with her, because I think the humans are still a bit cautious of the Fae, and they know that she has some training. And the diplomat says, I'm not going anywhere with anyone until you tell me why. And I think she looks at the boy and sees that he's kind of struggling, and the Imperial guards have got him by the arms and they've got him by the wings. They've clamped down on him so that he doesn't try and get away. And she too has her wings out. She's ready to fly, because they can just kind of fly away. The Imperial guards, they're trying to be respectful, but they will resort to force if they have to. They say, the king knows who you are, and until this can be resolved, we've been told to take you into custody. And then the orphan boy, I think, as he's struggling, and I think he pipes up and is like, but we saved that woman's life. Tell him who we saved. Diplomat, she says, because I think she's kind of cunning, you know, she would have to be to live these 2 very different lives. I will go with you, but this is not over. I think we've answered the question, why were the vigilantes imprisoned? Okay, let's write that up. The scene is, why were the vigilantes arrested? Used her position to gain access to the human capital so she could not only participate in the ceasefire talks, but do some vigilante work. This also raises some additional questions as well for future scenes, like one of these vigilantes is an orphan boy, and the orphan boy is kind of her assistant, but it's the Fae families that are trying to get these vigilantes out of prison. So that begs the question, I mean, I guess it's the diplomat's family, but maybe this orphan has a secret family, or maybe it's a found family. So that would be an interesting avenue to explore in the future. And who spilled the beans? What gave them away? The queen is telepathic, so maybe she figured out, but I don't think she would necessarily rat them out, especially not to the king, and then have they get arrested, unless she thought that would help somehow. Maybe it's her kind of naivete that gets these 2 in trouble. Maybe, but that's a different scene. See, every event is like a whole movie. You could tease it out. And that brings us to the end of round 1. A lot of things happened on this round that I did not expect, like, having one of our 3 sisters who are supposed to be paragons of virtue, one of them is a murderer. Did not see that coming, but I think that kind of fits in the world that I am building here. I mean, this is really about 2 races, the humans and the Fae, fighting for dominance as they have for, forever. It makes sense to see those similar themes reflected on an individual basis. So even though they're thought of very highly by their descendants, we know better because we watched them be created. We watched them grow. We know how they really are. And that's why I really love world building like this, because you never really know what's gonna happen, how the ideas that you have initially will be elevated. You think about things so differently when you are restricted or prompted in some way. It forces you to be even more creative, and you end up with stories that you never would have thought of originally, completely outside of what you expected. And it's how you integrate and expand these ideas into the context of your world that makes them what they are. You could have drawn these very same cards and interpreted them not only differently, but also in the context of your own lore. And that's what makes this system so powerful and so versatile. 1 round down, now it's time for round 2.